we have some news. Okay, I'm not going to say it's good news, and I'm not necessarily going to say it's bad news, but it definitely is not the best news. It is kind of it's closer to bad than it is good, but it is definitely news. I'll tell you that much. So there's been a couple of abortion cases that have been going all the way up to the Supreme Court. There's one from Mississippi, and the big one that we remember that sparked all of this was the one from Texas. They pushed through a 6-week abortion ban. Not only that, they passed a new law, basically a law to circumvent the entire Constitution. Yes, they wanted to ban abortion so bad. They made a law, if it was going to be set in place, it would be able for you to undercut any constitutional law that we have in the country. The Constitution would literally mean nothing, because what they did is that they banned abortion after 6 weeks. But what really happened is that they weren't executing it through the state. Basically, what happened is they set out bounties on women's heads. If you are accused of having an abortion after 6 weeks, the state would help boost your lawsuit against that woman and give you a bounty, pay you for it, and pay for all of the legal fees and everything, right? Stuff like that. So what they wanted was for the court to shut that down after you bring the lawsuit, but they didn't want to do it themselves because they knew it would be a lot harder for them to be able to do that, since it would be going through the state. And it would be really difficult for you to sue every single resident of Texas. So that's another thing, because any other resident has that same jurisdiction to do something like that in the state, right? So that's what basically happened. And that went to the Supreme Court. Two things, right, is what we thought was going to happen. Either it was going to be overturned or it was going to be upheld, because that's typically what we think the Supreme Court's going to do. The thing is, they kind of did neither and both at the same time. They kind of sidestepped the entire issue and then threw it back down to the lower courts. We can talk about it in a second. But when Texas was arguing this law in the Supreme Court, I believe it was Kavanaugh who asked, can't you just do this with literally every constitutional amendment? And Texas was like, I mean, I guess maybe, but they should pass a law against that. And they're like, aren't you supposed to be following the law? And they're like, it was really fucking stupid. But it shows you how far right the court is at the moment, because they didn't strike that down. This is because, without a doubt, you could pass this same legislation against any right, literally any right that we have. And it would go into effect the same exact way that Texas is. So you can circumvent any law in the country that way, which sounds kind of spooky. So this is what we're working with. Supreme Court allows challenges to the Texas abortion law, but leaves it in effect. So basically what they did is they said, we're not going to strike down this law, but we're also not going to just let it stand how it is. So basically what they did is they stopped Texas from being able to say that you can't sue them for this law. So now they can bring lawsuits against Texas for this, but that's going to be a little inadequate because the law is still in place at the moment. And so this is the biggest definition of kicking the can down the road, because this is going to go back to the lower courts. That's what they wanted, was for this to go back to the lower courts. And then it's just going to make its way to the Supreme Court again, where they're going to look at it again. But this is a loss. It's not as bad as it could have been. They didn't make a decision on this in either way just yet, on the legality necessarily of it. What they said was that they just wanted lower courts to rule on this before it gets back to them. So that's what we're working with right now. But until then, this still stands. So what's really important that comes out of this is that we need to make sure that we can't just rest on Supreme Court rulings to put through legislation. What's really unfortunate, or uphold a lot of rights. What's really unfortunate these days is that there's been so much gridlock in the country. We can't pass really simple things to protect people's fundamental rights. And all of that has to be adjudicated through the Supreme Court with what I would say, pretty flimsy protections for civil and human rights that we have from previous court cases and laws already on the books, which leaves a lot of blind spots. Women's rights, specifically abortion right here. We got pretty lucky that gay and trans people got or just LGBT people in general got roped in when it comes to not being able to be discriminated against, and that was like 2 years ago or something. They got pretty lucky there because that could have gone the opposite way. Just the fact that we had like one more Supreme Court justice that isn't insane on the court with the way that they read the 1964 Civil Rights Act, that's great. But this isn't going to stand. I mean, with a bunch of Republicans, a bunch of conservatives on the Supreme Court, they kind of really don't care about precedent. They just kind of don't. They're perfectly fine overruling it. And we saw this when it comes to them arguing over the Texas abortion law that went through, is that they seemed pretty poised to just let that stand without anything else getting in the way, which is, this doesn't mean it's just over. Now we have to fight for what it should have been in the first place, which is a law on the books saying that this has to stay in place. Is that it is a fundamental right. What would be great is if it was a constitutional amendment, but at this point in time, the likelihood of us being able to make this an amendment is, I think, literally impossible. So with that being said, what we have to do then is just make it a law, period. So they have to expend a little bit more political capital at the very least if they want to take it down, like they did with Obamacare. And thankfully that failed. And so that's important to go into the future to remember this. So what I would really like would be for like Biden to expand the Supreme Court and us to put through more Supreme Court justices so we won't have to deal with this. But with that being said, it doesn't look like we're going to be able to get that done. So we have to work with what we have at the moment. And so whenever the Democrats feel like it, I guess, we should absolutely pass a law enshrining this into the actual law of the country, that the Supreme Court can't just like flip flop back and forth on, depending on how red or blue the court is at that point in time where the court reaches their desk. The Supreme Court ruled on Friday that the abortion providers in Texas can challenge the state law banning most abortions after 6 weeks, allowing them to sue at least some state officials in federal court despite the procedural hurdles imposed by the law's unusual structure. So that's what we're living with in Texas right now. Super sick, super cute Texas. Very cool. In Texas, man. Hey, listen, they have a governor election. So if you're a Texas frog, if you're around there, if you feel like there's a couple of races that you want to be a part of, I would 100% keep an eye on Texas. I'm pretty sure Beto O'Rourke is running. And one of the last polls that I saw, he was headed to head with Greg Abbott. We're just going to have to see how that works. Moving into the future, it could go any way. Texas is turning more blue over time. So hopefully, in the next couple of years, our godsend, our Blexus. I'm ready for Blexus. I know that shit will taste like blueberries. That sounds great. But until then, we have to just live with what we have here. And still, listen, my whole thing, I still think that we should colonize right-wing states, all right? I think we should. It's time to colonize right-wing states. It's time, okay? I want Reconstruction on overdrive, all right? We never finished Reconstruction. It's time to pick up where we left off. It's time to colonize them. I want to start fucking sending all of the soy cucks into all of these red states and just slowly turn them blue over time. Just make sure that that Republicans get completely wiped out on a statewide level, at the very least. On an in-state level, that'd be super sick. But a statewide level, that'd be pretty sick. I'd like that too. I think that's the first thing that we could do. And thankfully, it's kind of working with some states. Texas is one. Arizona is another one where a lot of Californians have been moving from their extremely wealthy state to less wealthy states, in comparison. So their money goes further. I mean, and a lot of conservatives here, I'll touch on this for like a second. A lot of conservatives are saying that they're leaving California because communism or something. It's not. That doesn't, for one, it doesn't make any sense because communism is not in America. Two, they're leaving because of capitalism. They're leaving because of capitalism. Listen, when you make a lot of money in a certain area, that area gets more expensive to live in. That just happens. And so California and a lot of places in California has been getting more expensive because they have a lot of money. I'm sorry, with California being the, sixth? Because it just passed Canada, right? The sixth largest economy in the entire world. I'm pretty sure you don't get there with like hating capital, okay? I'm pretty sure you don't get that rich without hating capital. I'm quite sure of it, actually. So they're just going to other states and doing the same thing, but over again. Just do it over again. Go there, make the place nearly unlivable for anybody who has a normal income, and then bounce to the next place. That's how it works. It's basically kind of like how outsourcing works. It's inside of the country instead of we're traveling outside of the country to like places with the lowest possible wages so we can exploit that for the most money possible until they actually have the resources and the political power to ask for more than basically slave conditions, and then we like lift up and then go to the next place. So that's basically what's happening there. And so that's what I want, okay? I want more. I really wish it would be a little bit more holistic, where we, actually have a place where we give homes to homeless people, and it's not a complete death zone for anybody who's working a normal job that isn't like a massive CEO or someone who edits for fucking Facebook or like in the back end or something, making like $200K a year. I would really like that to be the case. But if this is what we're working with right now, I think the best thing possible would be to fuck over all of those red states, colonize them basically with soy. All right. I want a Starbucks on every corner in Mississippi. OK, on every corner in Kansas, everywhere. I know Kansas barely has any corners, but where they are, I want a Starbucks to be sitting there. OK, and they only serve soy. That's it. That's just soy. Blended soy, juiced soy, crushed soy, solid soy. That's tofu. That's it. Just nothing else. Nothing else even goes in the drink. It's just soy. It's just soybeans. Pure soy. OK, I want that shit injected into their veins. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how we fix this country, one step at a time. Yeah, gluten-free vegan estrogen. That's what I'm saying.